Chief.
Right, thanks for everybody for coming out. First, Chief Edwards, Canandaigua PD. Just give you a little preface here. So the accident itself is still under investigation. So, but really today is about recognizing the emergency responders and the civilian. The civilian, Mr. Simmons, couldn't be here today, but I did speak to him in depth yesterday. So, as everybody knows, we were dispatched to an accident on Saturday about 5:20 p.m. for a vehicle off the roadway on Western Boulevard down into the ravine. That call was placed by the 911 caller, and it was actually witnessed by Mr. Simmons. He was the first person on scene. He actually took action, went down into the ravine, and began trying to extract the driver. After that point, the circumstances would have it, the emergency responders sitting at this table were all in the right place at the right time and did the right thing. So I can't say enough about their actions. We're proud of everybody involved. So really today is about them and the actions they took, and how Saturday changed because of the decisions that were made by Mr. Simmons, Trooper Braun, Officer Katafmo, and Firefighter Kramer. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Major if you'd like to add anything. Or
Sure. So the mission of the New York State Police, and really the mission of all law enforcement agencies, is to serve the citizens of New York State. What happened that evening is typical of what all officers do throughout New York State on a daily basis, 365 days a year. So what you saw is a combination of first responders risk their life to save a life. And this is common. This is what we do. You don't see it all the time, and our troopers and Canandaigua police officer in this particular case, very humble. So you're not going to hear it often. So we appreciate you noting this, because sometimes there is a atmosphere out there where law enforcement isn't quite looked upon as fondly as they should be at times. So it's kind of nice to see this happen, but I'm going to tell you this is pretty typical. And so it's one mission, it's one team, it's what we do to serve the citizens of New York State. Appreciate you coming, and we do thank these officers and first responders for doing a fantastic job out there and risking their life to save a life. Thank you.
I don't know if it works for you guys, but
we're going to switch them.
We could switch the microphones, and maybe we can just individually kind of ask some questions, and then if somebody else wants to jump in.
Sure. Or if you just want us to get up, we can get out of these seats and have them sit.
Oh, no. We'll start down here.
No pressure. Seth, you want to ask him?
Yeah, so, well, maybe just tell us about your role in all of this.
So I was, I would say, initially, Mr. Simmons arrived on scene at first, and then the trooper down here, Trooper Braun, and then the firefighter also arrived on scene. Once I showed up, actually they were opening up the door to remove the victim from the vehicle. Once I got down there, we removed him from the vehicle that was on fire, and we brought him up the hill.
How far down the hill was he?
I would say 25 yards, 30 yards, give or take. It was well off the roadway that if you were driving by without the smoke or the fire that was at that time, nobody would have saw it.
So Mr. Simmons, really, I mean, that kind of got things going,
Yeah.
and then you guys responded.
Yeah.
Without him calling, it would be a different story today. It's a tremendous job what a civilian did to help us out. Without him, it would be a different story.
What goes through your mind when you're coming up on a burning car?
Actually, I was right down the road when the call came out that the car was on fire, so obviously we need to get there safely and quickly as possible. You really don't think, you just act. All the training that we go through, training with other law enforcement agencies, training with the fire department on how to do certain things in situations, you just act. It's natural to us.
Can you give us a time frame as far as like how many minutes it took for you guys to get there and get him out of the car safely?
The dispatch time was right around 5:19, and I can't speak for the trooper, but my understanding he was right in that area, so he'd be able better to speak to that. But to touch on, none of this happens without Mr. Simmons. I'd be remiss if I really didn't emphasize that. I spoke to him at length yesterday. He said, you know, to be honest with you, Chief, I was trying to catch the light at the boulevard. I didn't catch it, so good thing I was stopped there because nobody would ever seen that car. He actually saw the car go off the road and down in the ravine. And as a backstory to that, I happened to be off duty. I drove through that same area maybe 30 seconds before. I never saw the car. So if it wasn't for Mr. Simmons and him jumping out and doing what he did and notifying first responders, he's a Canandaigua resident, very humble, but again, in the right place at the right time, and he did the right thing for sure.
What is Mr. Simmons' first name?
Dwight.
Dwight.
Move the mics. You guys cool with that?
Yeah.
Thanks for helping out, Seth.
That's why I came back.
Thanks for coming back from Texas, we appreciate it.
Came back from Texas?
Yeah.
Family.
Pulled out.
Okay.
All right.
All the
Noble
Texas
cause,
guys,
right?
that's all I got.
You're a brave man.
Just,
So, yeah, tell us your role in this.
again, just, lucky situation as far as, being in the right location. And again, what I have to say with that civilian witness, Mr. Simmons, my role wouldn't even happen, and anybody else is here. When I arrived on scene, I couldn't even see the vehicle. It wasn't until I got out of my patrol car and I'm assuming it was Mr. Dwight's car parked on the side of the road. Saw the vehicle on fire down in the ravine. Went down there, and Mr. Dwight Simmons was already working on trying to help out the gentleman that was in the car. So him and I believe, and I kind of lost track of who was who at that point. Somebody, definitely, I think it was Mr. Simmons or maybe one of the first responders here. Again, it may have been you. I'm not really sure. We extricated the driver of the vehicle, and then, like the officer said, then I know for sure it was you. We grabbed his shoulders, and I think Mr. Simmons as well grabbed the gentleman's feet, and got him out of the immediate area.
What, if you can kind of describe, when you say the vehicle was on fire, I mean, how much flame was there?
I'd say probably it must have been about, definitely the front. I know where I was standing at the driver's door, there was fire underneath the vehicle. In fact, firemen actually dropped my flashlight right in the fire, so it was right underneath our feet. And I'd say probably the majority of the front portion of the car was on fire. There was so much smoke that when I first looked into the car, I couldn't even see the driver, who was leaned up against the back of the passenger door.
Yeah, what goes through your mind when you see that? I mean, you guys have a job to do, and obviously there's situations all the time.
Just to get somebody out of that situation. I mean, you just, the best hope for that individual is to remove them as fast as you can from that situation. So I know everything's, adrenaline's pumping, everybody's, excitable, but everybody came together, especially, Mr. Simmons not just being a citizen, not having really anything, that's keeping him there other than just doing the right thing. So, everybody just came together, got the gentleman out of there.
I know it's part of your job, things like this, but, do you get personal satisfaction out of it, if you look back and reflect, and, at the end of the day, a whole bunch of you, including a civilian, without all that action and teamwork, it might have very well have been something different.
Absolutely, and I think this speaks to, this is one of the good ones. And a lot of what we do is very, like the major touched on too. It's not always things aren't always the greatest. You don't always have a good ending. So when you have a good ending, it's a fortunate thing. It's a good thing. So it's one of those situations where you can look back and go, oh, that was good. Again, we've had situations that don't end this way. So.
Was the driver conscious at all during this time, or what was he?
He was. In fact, when I finally was able to see him in the car, and I put my head in a little bit, he reached his arm out, and I grabbed his arm.
Has any one of you have done this before? Anything similar?
Yeah. Well, I have, but mine didn't end the same way.
Just like the
Yeah,
just
so,
like the other guys, yeah. Tell us your role.
Yeah, I just happened to be driving down 5 and 20 Western Boulevard to go pick up my daughter, and I actually drove right past the incident and was waiting at the light, and I saw Mr. Simmons' car with the four-ways on, and then we got dispatched for a car that was possibly on fire, had been into an accident. I actually assumed it was Mr. Simmons' car and was thinking it was a very minor incident. Perhaps he had a deer and there was a little bit of smoke coming from the engine. So I spun a U-turn and again, I could see his car from where I was at when the call was dispatched. So I spun a U-turn, parked my truck, and at that point I saw the victim's car down into a small ravine by Sucker Brook. And I radioed that there was a car, down the ravine, and it was smoking. And then somebody had yelled that there's somebody trapped in the car. I heard that from my truck, and then I radioed and updated there was a car on fire with a person trapped. It took me a couple minutes to get my fire gear on, my protective clothing. And then by the time I got down there, I think you both were down there, so the state police and the city cop and Mr. Simmons attempting to get the civilian trapped out of the car. Actually, the helmet camera video, I don't know if you guys have seen that, but that's actually from my helmet. And you can see that it's not that clear of a video, but you can definitely see there's a lot of fire there. And, it was seconds before it would have been a pretty disastrous situation. Again, like everybody else has said, without Mr. Simmons' notification of the incident, I think it would have been a much different story, because we would have only seen a big fire by the time somebody called it in. And if he hadn't been there to stop and help, it would have been a whole different story. But and again, I have fire gear on, so I'm protected when I'm pulling this person out. But the other responders here, the city police and the state police, they just have flammable clothing. It's a little bit different scenario. So the fact that they're, and Mr. Simmons as well, the fact that they're going there putting themselves in risk is a little bit different than as a firefighter when I have my gear on. So, but thankfully it turned out the way it did.
And you obviously were there and saw everything, but when you look back, excuse me, when you look back at that helmet cam video, does anything go through your mind?
Yeah, I'm really appreciative of Chris here, just giving direction and guidance to the group. It was very clear, let's get this guy, let's pull him out. And you can definitely hear how it was an emotional scene. We only had seconds. The car had gasoline all around it, and the victim's injuries are pretty severe, so we needed to get him out and to safety. So I think it was such a great team job between the Canandaigua Police, Mr. Simmons, and the state police. And it was very fortunate that the outcome was the way it was.
Can you describe the injuries that the driver had when you arrived?
I have to have the ambulance speak to that. I guess you could talk to the hospital, but unfortunately, through different HIPAA laws and stuff, I wouldn't be allowed to describe the victim's injuries at this point.
And typically when a car gets on fire, how long does it take for it to get really severe and you guys have to step away for your safety?
Yeah, so it depends on the car fire, but this one in particular got pretty severe pretty quickly with the amount of gasoline that was on the ground. We had difficulty extinguishing the fire with the amount of gasoline there was, because water doesn't necessarily put out gasoline. So it was quite a challenge to get that fire out. And had the victim been in the car, again, it would have been a different outcome if we weren't right there to pull him out. So,
I mean, that adds a whole nother layer, because you don't know at what point that could, it could blow up.
I
Right,
can tell
yeah.
you at this point in the investigation, we do believe that the fuel line may have been damaged going down the ravine. Again, these folks at the table, they don't know that,
Right.
and but we do believe there was some damage to that vehicles that went down the ravine, possibly in the gas tank or the gas line. So.
And again, the danger of wearing non-firefighter structural clothing, trying to rescue somebody, I can't emphasize, the risk to the responders, going through that. At least I have protection on, but everybody else here did not. So,
Had you ever been a part of something like that before?
with a car accident and a fire, no, I have not.
Kind of shows how you just, really just, part of your job, part of your training. and you
Yeah,
just
part of the
spring
training.
into
Yeah,
action.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anything you can say about?
Not too much.
investigation?
The state police are great partners of ours in law enforcement when it comes to investigations, whatever it may be. So we're still working towards that end to get all the definitive answers of how that car ended up down there. And once we have that, we'll have some more follow-up information.
And can you say anything about how the person in the car is doing? I know there was some talk about serious injuries, but
That night, he was flown to Strong with non-life-threatening injuries and treated up there. So
Still in the hospital?
that I can't get into, but like I said, we don't believe the injuries are life-threatening.
How far down that ravine was the car?
It was about like 30 feet maybe.
Yeah,
Say 20, 30
because I know
feet.
the fire department was talking about the length of the hose and how long, or
Yeah.
about the length of the hose to get down there.
Some from the distance for the fire truck parked on top of the hill to where the car was about 150 feet away.
Is that a pretty easy spot to find, obviously, from our building?
No, like I said, I drove right past the whole incident and
I drove
I didn't
past
see it.
and
So
like I said,
yeah.
when I drove through there, I did see the car with the flashers on. I was on my way home. I just never even knew there was a car down there. So if you were driving by, like I said, unless somebody saw that car go off, you wouldn't have seen it till it was probably fully engulfed, would be my guess.
The way the roadway is, it starts to go up an incline, and then there's a guardrail that kind of follows the roadway, and the vehicle was going westbound on Western Boulevard and went down the ravine, so it wasn't, you couldn't see it from the road.
Anything else?
Well, just, it was a big night in the city of Canandaigua,
Yeah.
like an hour later,
Yeah.
like, as far as I know, you were all supposed to have a presence
I
in the parade.
I can tell you this, Mike, I was on the phone with the road supervisor, and we were overwhelmed that night. It was a big night in the city. Obviously, it's Saturday, the biggest shopping day of the year. Had a big parade going on. We had resources spread out. I can't thank the major enough. Whenever we need something, they're always just a call away. And here's a prime example of, this doesn't get done without, the partnerships at the table. Obviously, we can't handle fire. We work with them on a daily basis. State police, same thing. So, big night in the city. But like I said, it was a team effort. Doesn't matter what color blue or gray you're wearing. Everybody did the right thing.
So it truly was everybody was at the.
I'm sorry?
It truly was everybody was at the right place.
My conversation with Mr. Simmons, and I'll tell you this about Mr. Simmons. He did share with me. I told him, I said, we're going to be putting you in for a life-saving award through the Ontario County Safety Council. He goes, yeah, I've been recognized before. About 15 years ago, his neighbor had a young child that was a drowning victim, and he revived that child with CPR. So that tells you a little something about the character and cloth of Mr. Simmons. So like I said, when you peel the onion back, like I said, I went through there off duty and never saw a car. You think about all the timing that had to happen to make this right, it makes you start to ask some serious questions about how often that happens on a daily basis, and we're just not paying attention. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys want to shoot back to the major?